This is Launching Your Daughter podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. Now, here is today's episode. Episode 41. Well, welcome everybody. My guest today is Matt Hart, who is from Southern Indiana. Matt has been a high school theater, English, speech, and debate teacher for just over 20 years and has also served as a theater director at Gibson Southern High School. More recently, Matt has chosen to pursue an endeavor he is passionate about, which is speaking to people about bullying. He gives a 45-minute presentation entitled React to Bullying to various schools across Indiana, and he continues to reach more schools throughout the country to help educate and stop bullying in our schools. And the way he has his react to bullying, it's a lowercase R-E with the big uppercase is A-C-T, which is so cool because it really is, we're going to talk about today about how to act or react or participate in how to stop bullying. And I'm so excited to have you on the show today, Matt.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Well, I would like if you could tell our audience just a little more about really why you got into doing this and how bullying, I know you and I've talked before, it really is prevalent throughout our schools all over the country. But why is it so important to you to get this message out there?
Sure. Well, I actually, in the last few years teaching, had given up my directing role to a longtime assistant. And I started to journal in the time that I had after school. Normally, when you're a theater director, you don't see the sun throughout the day. You go home and it's completely pitch black. So it was an odd thing for me to leave a school and still see the sun. So I started really just to journal myself, and it was just sort of free form. And invariably, I kept returning to a time in my life that I was bullied. I went to a junior, senior high school, and from my 8th grade almost all the way through my freshman year, one person in particular decided I was going to be the target, and unfortunately, I really didn't do anything. So I really hadn't thought of that moment that much in my life. I guess I sort of buried it pretty far down. And in my, just free form journaling, all of a sudden I sort of didn't know I was going in that direction, but that's where I went. And at that point, my son was about ready to hit middle school as well. So it was kind of a perfect storm of a few things coming together rather organically, I would say. And in my mind, I started to think, what should I have done? Then I started to think very close to me, what should I tell my son as a parent? And certainly in 20 years of teaching, you see things, and I very often admit in front of crowds that as a 20-year teacher with my master's degree in administration, I could only sort of ballpark tell you what I thought bullying was, but I wasn't really super clear on sort of the three things that most experts say have to be going on. So at that point, I thought, well, if I don't know the sort of brass tacks of it, then how in the world would a second-year teacher or a fifth-year teacher, or much less a high school student, middle school student, or even an elementary school student really know sort of what to look for? And so then I decided I would take the gifts that I have. I'm a guitar player. I kind of sing. Mm-hmm. I taught, obviously, theater, so I can act. And obviously, I can, put together a lesson plan and think about the key points I want people to remember. So I kind of, that all sort of started swirling around together. And then I decided to put all of the research that I was doing, the best practice, and not just the anecdotal sort of things that people would say in regards to bullying, but the actual research, what it said. So I sort of put all that together and decided I would take it to whoever would like to have me. So I started in my own school corporation, specifically going to visit my son's school first.
Yep, that makes sense.
Right. And then going to our other two feeder schools and got a great response from teachers and students alike. And then the word sort of spread organically. Other schools started to call me because teachers and administrators know each other at different schools, and they have contacts. And so then the requests started to kind of filter in.
So I'm curious, would you mind sharing a little bit, like, what are some of the key things to look for? Whether, again, a lot of my listeners are parents, some of them are therapists, some of them are even the teen girls that, this is for and about. But what are some of the signs of bullying or ways to kind of tell that there may be some bullying going on?
Well, I have certainly enjoyed your podcast as we've connected. I've gone back and listened to a number of the episodes. And I've heard, and I think as parents, we get this when another parent says to us, in many situations, it's that sixth sense that goes up as a parent. I know you may be dealing with a middle schooler, but the things you might start to notice is just the out of the ordinary. It's things like sleeping patterns off, eating patterns off, destroyed book bags, things that kind of, you're dealing with kids at a very, difficult, people at a difficult time in their life. But what you may start to see as a pattern is something really kind of that doesn't sit right in your mind. And I certainly, whenever I specifically talk to parents, it's just that something's off and you don't know if you could actually explain it. But definitely if it's a pattern that goes on, if they have more than one really big blow up that week at home, if it starts to get into the next week, certainly I think it's time to have that somewhat tough conversation. But, you're as a parent going to notice some odd things. And many times I would tell parents that it's the routine things in life that just start to not make much sense more than just the one incident or the one thing.
And I love how you said that too. It really is like a sixth sense when parents are connected to their kids, or like you said, that routine, that kind of, this is their typical pattern of what they do. They come home, they do this, they do that. And all of a sudden they're a little more irritable. Whether their backpack has been destroyed or they don't have their lunch bag anymore. And it's like, okay, something seems to be off, but I'm not too sure what. So truly checking in to see if there's something going on. And I know sometimes with the kids that I work with, they don't want to tell the parents sometimes because either A, they feel embarrassed, or B, they're worried that their parents are going to just jump right in and get involved and they're going to make things worse. So they can be concerned about that. So what are ways that parents can have that conversation with their kids and help just kind of open up the dialogue without necessarily rescuing their kids, but again, get involved and be supportive to them?
Wow, what a great question. And it's one I'm asked a lot. And, I certainly have gone to a lot of different resources to look up this very question. And I think most of us would sort of admit that most of the times that we've tried the head-on approach typically does not work all that well.
Right.
The one thing I would start off by telling parents is, you cannot project onto yourself that you have somehow failed or let your child down, that this has even happened.
Beautiful
because
reminder.
I think what that does is, as parents or people that care for these kids, not even necessarily parents, coaches and teachers, we start to have some sort of guilt, and sometimes that guilt comes out in sort of not so productive ways. We get defensive. We're sort of embarrassed ourselves, or we feel bad about it. Beyond that, I would say look for those moments. Look, and if it is your child, those things that they enjoy, and maybe that you've done together, or that you've always done together. Maybe it's been a year since, maybe you have more than one child, and you've just went out for an ice cream or to sit down and have a dinner with them. It's amazing how many of these conversations I've heard about are just driving in the car,
yes,
where we're not sort of face to face with each other
Mm-hmm.
across a table or something. So it's, you can almost find those opportunities just to sort of check in with them and ask them how life is going. But certainly I want to stress to people that are having these conversations that, carrying, I guess, kind of your own baggage into it is probably going to shut it down right away. Because if we both sort of stick our feet in the mud and say, why didn't you tell me? And it escalates, then you're probably going to hit a brick wall there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that reminder because it is so important that there are so many conversations that can happen in the car. And it also really, for a lot of times, middle schoolers and for boys especially, there's more of a comfort in doing the side-by-side talking versus face-on. Whereas sometimes
Absolutely.
for girls, it can be a little more of the face-on. But yeah, again, it just kind of puts things at ease a little more when it's side by side or you're having some ice cream or something together or just kind of playing a game, and let that kind of topic kind of be spurred a little more organically, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So can you tell our listeners out there, how do you actually define bullying? Like, what are some of the classic, I guess, kind of behavior symptoms that when you go do these presentations in the schools and you're trying to educate, again, like you said, like the newer teachers and then the kids itself and the parents, what are some of what's the definition of bullying? And then what are some of the signs?
Sure. Well, one thing I definitely do whenever I present to a school is I actually match my definition up with physical gestures. And studies have shown that, if you do something sort of physical as you're trying to remember something, that's a physical cue that tends to seep the information a little further in the brain and maybe recall it a little easier. So the first thing I like to do, and all the way from kindergartners to 12th graders, is to ask for a volunteer, and somebody will come up and I ask them to make the meanest possible face that they can make.
Love it.
So it's teeth and it's claws. And so the first thing I talk to them about is that if it's bullying, it truly is mean. There is harm intended, and that holds true from a kindergartner all the way to a 12th grader. And when we talk a little bit about, we're not talking about rude, we're not talking about ill-mannered, that sort of thing. We're talking about, either physically harm is trying to be done or sort of emotionally. Someone's trying to tear you down and make you think less of yourself. So mean is the first one that I want them to remember. The second thing is I normally pull someone else up if I can get any volunteers after that first thing. And the second person gets kind of, time off as far as embarrassment goes. And I just ask them to stick one finger up in the air. I have to make sure it's appropriate, obviously. So normally I say, stick a number 1 up in the air. And so they do that. And so then I go over and grab their finger and say, here's the second thing. If something truly mean happens, but it only happens once, we are not talking about bullying, because bullying is a repeated behavior. Experts mostly call, something mean happening once, an incident or something to that effect. But bullying is truly mean, and it's happening repeatedly. Sort of same person, same types of thing. I try to let them know that it may not be the exact same sort of thing, but it's similar. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing is a lot of fun, and I admit to whatever crowd I'm speaking to, when I read this first, even as a victim of bullying, it sort of confused me. I didn't quite know what it meant, but it's something called a power imbalance. And I try to get that across to them in the effect of, you don't even think you can have the conversation, right? The conversation that says to this person, I know you think this may be funny, or I don't know why you're doing this to me, but please stop. And, that's where I came from. I knew it was mean. I knew it was happening over and over, but I didn't have the confidence to take that step. And so I break it down for them in the sense that, it may be that this person is physically bigger than you. They may be older than you. They may be a part of a group that you don't feel a part of. And maybe you're worried about, if you do say something, what is the peer group going to do? Or, you're afraid of what that's going to do. So all of those are kind of components of maybe a power imbalance existing. So I end with, I don't know anything better that gets across power than a good muscle show. So whoever my third victim or volunteer is has to show me a double muscle show there.
Oh, I love it. And I love how you've got it, as you said, that visual part for our humanness, right? It's a good match for when we're learning something new. And so those body, physical gestures, things like that, it really helps implant that information into our minds. And yeah, really helps remind us, okay, he said this, then he said this, then he said this. And that's what bullying is part of. And I love it. I love those signs that you do. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure the volunteers, there was times where like, okay, I get to be out in front of everybody. And other times like, oh, what did I just volunteer for?
I have certainly had my share of wilting flowers once they get up in front of 800 classmates and realize they have to make a mean face.
Right. They're like, oh, okay. Well, that's great that they still, again, they're brave enough to step up there and do that. So that's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
So when you've named it react to bullying, what are some of then the suggestions that you give to the students and again to the teachers and parents of how to really, for lack of a better phrase, I guess, fight back against bullying? How do you then help stop it? What are some of the things that kids can do?
Sure. The capital A and the capital C and the capital T stand for 3 words, and I tell them that the A stands for the word act, and I tell them I'm going to tell you how to act or how researchers say to act. Then if that doesn't work, we're going to go to the C, and that is call. I'm going to tell you who to call on, and then finally the T stands for tell. So they sort of mimic those back to me, and then we do a couple things, and we return back to the A. So we go back over the fact that I told them that the first step many times is that they need to act calm and confident. Many times, someone confronts you and merely a calm confidence sometimes will, they'll see, well, I'm not going to get the reaction that I want out of this person, or this person doesn't seem to be affected by it. So there's a lot of times that they'll sort of move on to an easier target, unfortunately, but at least for the individual, sometimes that takes care of it. The other thing I was really aware of is I can't, it escapes me where I read it, but this person talked about the fact that we don't necessarily want to make an entire society of, I immediately go get rescued by someone else. So this idea of, and I tell them, you may not feel like it, but you need to show someone who is trying to bully you calm confidence. And we want you to work on it. We want you to try to develop that. And I don't know about you, but whenever I signed my first home loan, was shaking in my boots on the outside. I tried to make it look like I was calm and confident, and I had it all taken care of. And then I saw the big number that I was going to have to pay for my house and thought, oh my goodness. So so that first one is acting calm and confident. And I say to them, if that doesn't work, then we need to go on to the second step. And I would interject here that I talk to a lot of parents that sort of will tell their kids, act calm and confident, act like it's not bothering you, just ignore them. And that's certainly, I think, pretty widely encouraged as a first step. But you have a guy in front of you, or you're listening to a guy that tried to act calm and confident, and I did it for 2 years, and I don't want anyone to live that long with truly being bullied.
Yeah.
So the second step is the call, and I talk to them about calling on someone in their life that can help them. I actually called on a coach in my life, and I show him that moment. I actually act that moment out where I approached him, and I talked to them about the fact that 3 days later, it all stopped. So oftentimes I will ask, I will say, just for me, let's make a list of 3 people in your life that you can call on that can immediately make a difference. And so we often hear parents or adult family members. We hear coaches, teachers, counselors, therapists, certainly religious figures, if that happens to be someone's background. And I really stress that these are the adults, the trusted adults in their life. Mm-hmm. I do hear a lot, especially in middle school, I'm going to call on my friend to help me out. And I sort of caution them that that normally we can't rely on a 14-year-old, especially one that's trying to take up for their best friend, to know how to mediate and end that problem sort of well. Mm-hmm. It sort of goes like, come on, let's go. And a big group of people is now confronting another group of people, and it sort of goes sideways. So really calling on those adults in their life that can help them. And then what I found in my research, the third one is tell. And I really stand in front of them and tell them that if they truly have been bullied, it's not their fault. They haven't in some sort of way caused this by who they are or what they are, because many times we know that kids who are bullied feel that they are at fault in some way, feel that either what they already are physically or what they do or continue to do is causing this to happen to them. So I want them to know, and I want someone to stand in front of them and say, if you are going through this, I want to tell you that you haven't caused this. There's not something wrong with you. Yeah. People typically are not this mean for this long just because they can be. I'm very proud in the fact, and forgive me that pride, but to stand in front of 60,000 kids this year, and that was going to come out of my mouth for sure before I got out of every school. I wanted them to know that.
Well, and I think, Matt, yeah, I'm glad that you do feel proud of that, only because it is such a very important message for our kids to understand and to hear that, and for parents, teachers, mentors, coaches to remind the kids who have been bullied, it is totally not their problem nor their fault. They didn't deserve it in any way, shape, or form. And I don't think we can reiterate that enough, because in my practice and all the years that I've worked with families and with kids, there is still so much shame that comes up when they've been a victim of bullying or of abuse. And that belief of, oh, I could have done something different. It was because of what I had for lunch that day, what I wore, that I didn't say something just totally perfect. And it's like, oh my gosh, no. That's not
Absolutely.
You, not you at all. That's the other person. So I love that reminder. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm curious then, once you've really talked with folks and everything, what are some of the things maybe parents can, because again, what I imagine in my mind, right? They gain all this information. The kids are really hearing it. And I know what I encourage a lot of times for both the middle school kids and high school kids, and sometimes they roll their eyes at me, is role play it. So whether you're with your parents or you've got some friends over and you all just say, hey, let's kind of role play. What would we do if, somebody tried to bully us, or somebody tried to do this at school, or I saw this of a friend. So what are some of the things that you may tell the parents, I guess, to kind of help really keep this information not necessarily alive, but to remind their kids of what they can do?
Once again, so happy you asked that question. You're hitting all the right points. I appreciate it. Because when I first started to perform, I sort of left it at very early on, version 1.0, 1.2, and that sort of thing. I sort of left it like, okay, here's what bullying is, and here's how to react to it. And I thought, well, I'm kind of just preparing people to wait for bullying to happen, to sort of play catch. So what can I do? What can I encourage to actually maybe proactively address bullying? And so one of the first things that I certainly encourage is, those extracurricular types of things, just to build self-esteem, just to build, sort of self-worth. So certainly I would say to parents, look for those opportunities for whatever the interest that your child shows. And certainly, it can change from year to year, and maybe that frustrates us a little bit. But, just to develop that self-confidence in whatever it is that they they decide to pursue. I know sometimes we do get a little frustrated, but the benefits from being a part of a team or accomplishing some goals really just, I don't think, can be overstressed. The second thing I certainly do is I talk to them about the opposite of bullying being kindness. And what I have been really fortunate, when I first started, I talked about this young man in Michigan. It was a national story, who stuck up for a young lady who happened to have Down syndrome, and she was one of the cheerleaders. And he stood up for her in the middle of a game and didn't, escalate the problem, but certainly brought light to the problem. And two boys who were making fun of her were removed from the game. And this boy, along with his teammates, were sort of held up as, obviously something really admirable that they did, and helping someone else out. And so I told that story as kind of a closer, and so many people responded, obviously, well to it. And I said, very early on, I started to give every school a challenge and every kid a challenge of maybe something like that can happen here. Now, maybe it's not quite to that level, but, simple kindnesses have a way of sort of catching in a school. So what is so maybe the best part of my job is to, a couple weeks down the road, get an email or something sent to our social media sites of kids who have done something as simple as Post-it notes on lockers with kind sayings to I just revisited a school and gave a couple T-shirts to two young men that did a school-wide fundraiser for a classmate who was undergoing cancer treatments. And they just went home that night and took the challenge of do something kind, whether it be small or great. And obviously, it floored everyone with such a kind gesture from them. And so it's this wonderful thing now that I get to show examples, not of someone, from across the country, but many times from 20 minutes down the road, a boy did this, or a soccer team did that. And what a cool job for me to be able to collect those stories. And ultimately, my hope is a culture is developed in a school where there's such kindness going on and there's such, helpfulness going on, that when bullying does sort of pop up, it's such an odd thing in that culture of kindness that it's almost sort of shocking. And the kids who are at that school who've bought into that culture of kindness really want to take care of that and want to take care of those people, and they almost are the biggest allies that a school can have.
Wow. That, just listening to you describe what you share towards the end of your presentation, really just touched home for me. It's so much of that. I love the message of the loving kindness, the being able to give back, the paying forward, however you want to phrase it, and to create a whole school atmosphere about being kind is extremely powerful, because I know a lot of times we don't necessarily hear the good stuff that happens. And so
Right.
to really focus on that and to make that stand out more than the negative, that's huge. And that's so awesome that you can definitely, again, being from Southern Indiana, right? Taking those stories from the schools that are like just down the road type of thing, to be able to share that more and more, it can totally catch on into all the communities going, well, let's see if we can even do it better, right? It's a good competition.
Right. Yeah. That has happened quite a few times.
Yeah, that is awesome. Very, very, empowering, not just for the students, but for the staff, for the parents, and to really embrace differences versus saying different is a negative or a bad thing. It's like, no, it's actually really cool, and we can all give back in that way. So that's lovely.
Thank you.
I am curious, as we start to wrap up here, is there like a book or any other piece of advice that you may give parents kind of after the presentation, or maybe even the kids, that you sometimes recommend to them that helps them continue this, whether it's the act of kindness or making them feel more confident? Is there anything else that you sometimes tell them that helps really embrace being able to stand up for yourself, to feel self-empowered, and to no longer tolerate bullying?
Sure. One of the things that obviously that I've mentioned earlier is that our social media sites, and it's react to bullying, all one word. We have a Facebook, we have a Twitter, and an Instagram account even. And essentially, because, a website is oftentimes locked in place for quite a while, I've devoted our sites to really just, number one, I do put some resources there, some links to some really, really good resources. There's actually Bullying UK is one of my favorite sites on Twitter, and it gives parents a lot of resources. Just if you have to approach a school, what to look for, really kind of the big questions that I often get, whether it be from schools or parents. They do a really great job on Twitter. And so I'll link them a lot of times. Stopbullying.gov is a great resource that I, when I go to a school, what I promise is that I will be a resource for them. I just don't give a presentation and then you don't hear from me from a year.
Right.
I sort of, every month or so, I'll send them 2 or 3 things like that. But stopbullying.gov is something that I really very often send them articles from. There's also pacer.org, PACER.org, which gives some great resources as well. And then definitely all of those really stress, a problem that is just spread like wildfire that we're all very much behind the learning curve on, which is cyberbullying, which I obviously address specifically in the middle and the high school.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I would just say is this for me has started out very local and for my community in Southern Indiana. But the response has been so great that I really hope, I didn't have it as my goal to travel the country when I started, but things seem to be going well enough that I really feel like maybe there's an audience out there on an even larger scale. And I certainly will go just about anywhere to help spread this message.
Yeah.
Because I really feel like people, they're informed and then they're equipped and hopefully they can be inspired as well.
Absolutely. And I'll have all of this on the show notes. So if you're driving, don't worry. You can go out to launchingyourdaughter.com and I will have Matt's website, Twitter, and Instagram, Facebook, and all that good stuff in the show notes so that you can find his links to that. And Matt, I totally didn't even dawn on me that you and I had talked a little bit about cyberbullying before, but I totally didn't touch on it this time. So you may have to do a part 2 of coming back and be able to talk to a little more to our parents about what that is and how to help work through that as well. But what you've given today, I hope, our audience that is hearing this today finds it very helpful. I found it also, as you said, it's very inspiring of how to really change that. To change those behaviors and acts that are going on in this school and maybe in the neighborhoods, to be able to take those things back and really make it a place of kindness and compassion, and to look forward to going to school versus being afraid of it because of a few students. So I really love what you're doing and keep up the awesome work. And thank you for taking the time to be on the show today. Absolutely my pleasure. And right back at you. You are doing phenomenal work, and I'm a subscriber now. So awesome. You won me over. Well, awesome. Well, thank you again, Matt. You're welcome. I hope you found today's episode helpful, and you now have ways to really talk about bullying with your teen daughter, tween daughter, or if you have a son. Again, educate them on what's okay and what's not okay, so they don't have to go through middle school, high school, for years being bullied, that they can actually take that back and to know that it's not their fault, that they didn't deserve it. I invite you to go out to launchingyourdaughter.com and sign up for the newsletter. The local high school girls teen group is getting ready to start in a couple weeks. So if you're here in Indianapolis, please sign up and then I can get a hold of you. The other thing is for all my mom listeners out there, sign up for the newsletter. I've got some upcoming videos that are, again, all the stuff is free to be able to help support you in this journey with your daughter. Take care. Thank you for listening to Launching Your Daughter with Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist. For more information or to stay up to date, go to launchingyourdaughter.com. You can sign up for my email list or join my Facebook group. Thank you.